he wanted to build a car, as he said, to kick their ass on the street, too. So this is Carroll Shelby's answer to Ferrari. There were rumors it was painted Ferrari red, that was his sort of to Ferrari.
A rusted red coupe sat in a field in rural Texas for decades, half stripped, engine gone, panels missing, looking like nothing more than another forgotten Mustang rotting in the weeds. Nobody who passed it knew they were looking at one of the most important lost artifacts in American automotive history. Nobody who owned it fully understood what they had. And for 50 years, the people who did know it once existed believed it had been destroyed on purpose, crushed the way so many prototype cars from Detroit's golden era were crushed, erased because that was simply what happened to test vehicles once their job was done. This is the story of how that belief turned out to be wrong, and how a car built inside Carroll Shelby's most secretive experimental program came back from the dead. To understand why this discovery mattered so much, you have to understand the man behind it. Carroll Shelby was not a boardroom executive or a trained engineer with a framed diploma on the wall. He was a Texas chicken farmer turned racer, a man with a failing heart and an unwillingness to accept limits, who happened to be one of the most gifted drivers of his generation. In 1959, he won the 24 Hours of Le Mans behind the wheel of an Aston Martin, sharing the win with co-driver Roy Salvadori. It should have been the high point of a long career. Instead, it was nearly the end of one. A heart condition forced Shelby out of competitive driving almost immediately afterward, and most men in his position would have quietly stepped back from the sport altogether. Shelby did the opposite. If his body would not let him race anymore, he decided he would build the cars that could. That decision led him to take the lightweight British AC Ace and stuff an American V8 into it, creating the Shelby Cobra, a machine that felt almost unreasonable next to the refined European sports cars it was designed to humiliate on track. It was loud, it was raw, and it worked. Shelby's philosophy was never about subtlety. It was about combination. Take something elegant, add something brutal, strip away anything that slowed it down, and let the result speak for itself. That approach caught the attention of Ford Motor Company at exactly the moment Ford needed it most. By the mid-1960s, Ferrari was dominating international endurance racing, and Henry Ford II wanted revenge badly enough to throw enormous resources behind getting it. Ford's GT40 program had potential but lacked the killer instinct required to turn potential into victories. Shelby American took the program over, and the results reshaped racing history. Ford beat Ferrari at Le Mans in 1966, then defended that win in 1967, 1968, and 1969, a run of dominance that remains one of the great underdog stories in motorsport. Shelby's role in that transformation elevated him from a talented tuner into something closer to a legend, the man manufacturers called when they needed speed to stop being a marketing slogan and start being real. At the same time, Ford wanted to give its new pony car, the Mustang, some genuine performance credibility. Lee Iacocca understood how to sell the Mustang to the public, but he needed someone who understood how to make it dangerous. That's where Shelby came in again. The GT350 launched in 1965, followed by the GT500 in 1967, and both cars turned a mass-market coupe into something with real teeth. But the cars that reached showrooms were never the whole story. Behind every Shelby that customers could buy, there was a hidden layer of experimental machines, engineering testbeds that were never meant to be seen by the public at all. In the 1960s, prototype vehicles rarely survived long. They existed to test an idea, whether that was an engine configuration, a suspension geometry, a braking system, or a styling direction, and once that idea had been evaluated, the car itself became a liability. Keeping it around created legal risk, revealed unreleased engineering to competitors, and served no purpose once the data had been collected. So prototypes were often quietly disposed of, sold off without documentation, or simply crushed. Nobody working at Shelby American or Ford in 1967 was thinking about future collector value. They were thinking about deadlines and racing calendars and what the next model year needed to look like. That is precisely why the disappearance of one particular car became such a persistent mystery among Shelby historians for so long. That car was known as Little Red, a 1967 Shelby GT500 built as an engineering prototype, internally designated EXP. Unlike almost every Shelby the public ever saw, Little Red was not a fastback. It was a notchback coupe, a body-style Shelby American essentially never used for production cars. Along with a sister prototype known as the Green Hornet, built the following year, Little Red was one of only 2 notchback Shelbys ever constructed. That alone would make it a significant find. But its real value came from what it represented inside Shelby's operation, a rolling laboratory used to test big block engine configurations, supercharging experiments, and styling cues that would later influence the 1968 Mustang California Special. It was not a finished statement. It was a question Shelby and his engineers were still trying to answer about how far the Mustang platform could be pushed. For decades, the accepted explanation for Little Red's disappearance was straightforward and depressing. It had gone to the crusher like countless other test mules before it. Collectors had photographs. They had internal documentation referencing the car's existence. What they did not have was the car itself, and without it, Little Red remained a footnote, a rumor repeated at swap meets and car shows, always followed by the same resigned conclusion that it was gone for good. The renewed search for Little Red really gained momentum because of its sibling prototype, the Green Hornet. That car, a 1968 GT500 notchback fitted with genuinely advanced engineering for its time, including electronic fuel injection, four-wheel disc brakes, and an independent rear suspension system decades ahead of anything else wearing a Mustang badge, was owned by Craig Jackson, chairman and CEO of Barrett-Jackson. During the extensive research and restoration process surrounding the Green Hornet, Jackson and restoration specialist Jason Billups began asking an obvious but previously unanswered question. If one experimental Shelby notchback had survived against all odds, was it possible the other one had too? Most people in the collector world would have called that wishful thinking. Little Red had been searched for using its Shelby serial number for years, and that search had gone nowhere every single time. The breakthrough came when Billups and his team realized they had been looking at the problem from the wrong angle entirely. The car had two separate identities. There was the Shelby identity, the one everyone recognized and had been chasing without success, and beneath it, buried in factory paperwork, there was the original Ford VIN the car had been assigned before Shelby American ever touched it. When the team shifted their research toward that Ford identification number instead, doors that had been closed for 50 years suddenly opened. Old registration records, ownership transfers, and title histories began forming a trail, and that trail pointed toward rural North Texas. On March 3, 2018, the search ended. The car was found sitting among a collection of other aging vehicles, its engine and transmission removed, several body panels missing, its condition rough enough that an untrained eye would have dismissed it as just another tired old Mustang shell not worth a second look. To the people who understood exactly what they were seeing, it was something closer to a miracle. When Craig Jackson, Jason Billups, and respected Mustang authentication expert Kevin Marti examined the vehicle and confirmed its identity, the story shifted overnight from folklore to documented history. The lost Shelby GT500 EXP prototype, the car everyone assumed had been destroyed, was not a legend anymore. It was real, and it had been sitting in a Texas field the entire time. What makes Little Red's survival so remarkable is that nothing about its journey was deliberate preservation. It survived through neglect, confusion, and a chain of owners who likely never fully understood the historical weight of what sat in their possession. Prototype cars are especially vulnerable to this kind of quiet erasure, because without clear paperwork or public recognition, they can be parted out for scrap value, mistaken for ordinary production cars, or simply left to decay without anyone noticing what's being lost. Little Red slipped through every one of those gaps by pure accident. Nobody set out to save it. It simply never happened to reach the moment where someone decided to finish it off. Understanding why this car mattered requires understanding what experimental vehicles reveal that production cars never can. A production car shows what a manufacturer was ultimately willing to sell to the public, filtered through cost constraints, safety regulations, and marketing decisions. A prototype shows what its builders were actually willing to try before any of those compromises entered the picture. Little Red and Green Hornet were where Shelby and Ford's engineers pushed ideas that were, in some cases, years ahead of what the market or the corporate bureaucracy was ready to accept. Independent rear suspension and four-wheel disc brakes eventually became standard expectations on serious performance cars, but Shelby's team was testing versions of those concepts on notchback prototypes while most of Detroit was still treating them as exotic novelties reserved for European road cars. Little Red's fingerprints also reached the public in a way its owners never realized. Its styling directly influenced the 1968 Mustang California Special, meaning that even during the decades when the physical car was missing, presumed destroyed, part of its design language was already sitting in driveways across America under a different name. People had been looking at echoes of Little Red for 50 years without knowing the source vehicle still existed somewhere, waiting. Once the car was authenticated, Jackson and his team faced a genuinely difficult decision that divides serious collectors. Preserve it exactly as found, rust and missing parts included, treating every flaw as historical evidence, or restore it to running condition and let it live the way Shelby originally intended his cars to live. They chose restoration, but a carefully documented one, because a prototype like this had no single simple factory specification to fall back on. Its experimental nature meant every choice about which version of the car to rebuild toward required research rather than guesswork. In January 2020, Little Red was unveiled publicly at Barrett-Jackson's Scottsdale auction, standing alongside the restored Green Hornet for the first time in history, two experimental Shelby notchbacks that had shaped decades of collector speculation now sitting side by side in the same room. It was not simply a rare car being revealed. It was a wrong assumption being corrected in real time.